Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Perspective Podcast, Episode 1, a podcast dedicated to all things Arsenal. I'm your host, Rashid. Now, the aim of this channel and podcast is to add something of value to the Arsenal family and the Arsenal content creation space. Recent years have been the inspiration behind this channel launch. The efforts made by the club from all levels to reconnect to the fans of the club have been impressive, and we hope to look into that in more detail over the coming episodes. But this is the reason for this launch. As far as I'm concerned, Josh Kroenke, Edu, Vinay, and Arteta and his whole team are doing many things right with the club. Mikel would be the first to tell you that there is a lot to improve to get to the standards that Arsenal want to achieve. However, these steps in the right direction have not gone unnoticed, and there is a palpable feeling amongst the Arsenal fan base that there is a greater connection with the club. Much more so than in perhaps times not so distant in the past. But I'm not going to dwell on that. A little bit more about myself. My social media weapon of choice is undoubtedly the artist formerly known as Twitter, where I have joined and participated in many spaces there, and it is indeed my time in those spaces that has given rise to this channel. And the support towards it has come primarily from the fan base participating regularly on Twitter. I'm still getting my head around the name and logo X and hoping that the little blue bird makes a comeback. But I'll leave that for other discussions. So, what we're going to go over in this episode, we'll review Arsenal's first game of the Premier League season, which was against Nottingham Forest at the Emirates. We'll talk about a few things to take away from the game. Sadly, we'll be spending some time discussing injury news, notably that of Jurrien Timber. We'll also talk transfers, focus really on David Raya. And we'll cover Mikel Arteta's press conference ahead of the Monday night football game against Crystal Palace. The new Premier League season. So at the time of recording, it's been a good few days since the first game of the season for Arsenal. The season prior, Nottingham Forest returned to top flight football after 23 years, and they finished the Premier League placed 16th. Arsenal, on the other hand, who for many years had not really challenged for the Premier League title, had set the pace for much of the last season, only to be beaten at the end by perennial winners Manchester City. So with the new season optimism hovering around most, if not all, of the Premier League clubs, it was interesting to find out how Arsenal would fare against Nottingham Forest, especially considering the ultimate disappointment of last season in the league, and also on the backdrop of Erling Haaland and co. the night before dispatching Vincent Kompany's Burnley 3-0 at Turf Moor. So, Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest, 12th of August 2023, kickoff 1 p.m. And that's really the first thing to be said about the game, is that it was scheduled to kick off at 12:30 in front of the cameras. However, due to issues with turnstiles, the game was delayed by half an hour. Now, as one affected by the turnstile issues, I've got to send a big thank you to the Arsenal staff who were really helpful in getting me into the Emirates prior to a ball being kicked. And from my understanding, all ticket holders were in the stadium prior to kickoff. So, on to the match. From my perspective, it felt that the opening 15 to 20 minutes were cagey and that Arsenal were trying to find their feet and rhythm. But it must be said, though, that Saka seemed to be the primary option for creating chances. And there were 2 or 3 interesting opportunities from him from the right. One a bit more central where he tried to play a through ball to Nketiah. But really, the big first chance actually went to Forest with a headed pass catching out the high line of Arsenal's defence, allowing Brennan Johnson a clear run one-on-one against Ramsdale, to which he simply just fluffed his lines, shooting high and wide of the goal. For many parts of the first quarter of the game, Arsenal's movement seemed fluid. However, it just didn't feel like the passing was as quick and decisive as it could be. But come off the 26th minute, and there's a lovely piece of skill by Martinelli on the left. Gets him away from two Forest players and opens up the opportunity for Nketiah to receive the ball, run at defence, which he did, and unleash a right foot effort, which did take a bit of a deflection, and it beat our former keeper, Matt Turner, 1-0 to the Arsenal. So after the goal, you see a clear improvement in the quality from Arsenal. Passing is better, there's more aggression, there's more control of the game, and there's more urgency in the play as well. And the crowd are doing their part to try to add to the energy on the pitch. 32 minutes, it's 2-0. And it was a class finish from Saka. It started from Saliba dispossessing Gibbs-White, who, by the way, I really thought should have been carded earlier in the game for the way he manhandled Ben White at a set-piece opportunity. Anyway, Saliba dispossessed Gibbs-White down Arsenal's right. He plays 1-2 with Partey before laying off the ball to Saka, who sends the ball to the top left corner after cutting in from the right. The shot coming from outside the box. Just another example of Saka's quality, his threat, and it's really good for him to get a goal right at the beginning of the season. At that point, Arsenal, they were really in control of the game. And I think the same could be said for the rest of the first half. But just before the end of the first half was the concern surrounding Jurrien Timber. He would pull up complaining what seemed to be a knee injury, and then would come on to this in the second half, but would be forced off early. Speaking of the second half, I thought at times it was very, very different to the game that was played out in the first half. I think from about the 60th minute onwards, you could see that the attempts by Forest they were trying to stretch the Arsenal offence by way of breaking out quickly whenever they regained possession. So many times, those attempts would be fluffed out by Saliba, who I thought had a very decent game. There seemed to be, however, less urgency from Arsenal in the first part of the second half. I was hoping, I think many were hoping, that Arsenal would really go for the jugular at this point and really try to kill off the game with one or two more goals. However, I think the introduction of Elanga and Awoniyi for Forest did change the dynamics of the match, and it definitely made Forest more dangerous. And really, this is where the goal for Nottingham Forest came. So it came from an Odegaard corner, which was dealt with by the shoulder of Gibbs-White, into the ground and was picked up by Awoniyi. Awoniyi was then able to release Elanga on the left. And watching it in real time, once Elanga gets the ball, I was thinking Elanga is really, really fast. He is going to be a good outlet for chance creation, I think, for Forest in their league campaign. Anyway, on to the goal. Awoniyi continues his run into the box and meets Elanga's pass from the left and scores. From Gibbs-White's clearance to the ball hitting the back of Ramsdale's net, it took 14 seconds. Declan Rice did try to make a last-ditch challenge on Awoniyi, but it was too late. Now, with regards to this goal, I think some may argue that without Arsenal players tracking back, with enough Arsenal players tracking back, I should say, they should have been able to deal with it. I think others may say that looking at the scoreline and the time of the match, Arsenal maybe committed too many players up front for the corner, but I think it's definitely something to debate. So Arteta's instant reaction was to get Gabriel Magalhaes on for Martinelli and for the defence to resemble a more traditional back four. So the game did get a bit more stretched for the last 10 minutes. And both sides had chances. There was some lovely interplay between Trossard, Odegaard, and Havertz, with Saka being found in the Forest box by Havertz. However, Saka wasn't able to get a real clean connection, and so that chance was gone. Owoniyi, I think, as well, he looked a handful with some good hold-up play. As of Elanga, I think Owoniyi is going to be a very important player for Forest this season. On other chances, from a long ball clearance by Partey, Havertz was clean on goal, but he had two Forest players breathing down his neck, and one of them, Serge Aurier, he was able to put in a tackle and clear. So the score would end up 2-1 to Arsenal. So what can be taken from the first game of the season? There are many points, but here are some of them. 1. Starboy's star continues to rise. Saka's strike, which ultimately proved crucial to the 3 points, showed that he continues to develop, and it's exciting to see what he can achieve in the next few years. Martinelli in the first half was at times sublime, really dangerous, and I think the hope is this season that he can also take his development to another level. I think really goals and assists from Martinelli in greater numbers compared to last season is really definitely one of his targets. Now, Havertz and Trossard, they deserve more time for different reasons. Havertz simply hasn't played enough time under Arteta for us to see whether he'll be a hit or not. So he needs time. And as a fan base, we need to be patient with this part of the process where Arteta is trying to integrate Havertz into his squad. As for Trossard, I think he continues to impress each time he's on the pitch. Now, next point. We do hope that Jurrien Timber makes a full recovery. There'll be more on him when we cover the injury news. And then finally, I think the points are all that matters at this stage of the season. I think better 90-minute performances are achievable by the squad. However, not much can or should be concluded by this first game. The way I look at it is this. Whenever there's any discussion about the form guide traditionally consists of the last 6 games played by any particular club. So using that logic, I think we really need to see where Arsenal are after 6 games in the Premier League before we start, making any judgments in terms of how we are performing and what our expectations are for the rest of the season. Now, injury news. I must say it looked bad as soon as he pulled up in the second half. Many were commenting and many were uttering those dreaded 3 letters, ACL. And I think it has been now confirmed by the club that Timber did sustain an injury to his anterior cruciate ligament. Here's exactly what the club had to say. Further to detailed assessments with consultant specialists since Saturday, we can confirm that Jurrien Timber has sustained an injury to his anterior cruciate ligament in his right knee. Jurrien will undergo surgery in the coming days and will be out of action for a period of time. The support and expertise from our medical team and everyone at the club will now be focused on Jurrien's rehabilitation program to ensure he recovers well and is back playing as soon as possible. I think it goes without saying, but we'll say it anyway. We do hope Timber comes back fully recovered and before the end of the season. Let's talk transfer news. So, with Kai Havertz, Jurrien Timber, and Declan Rice in the door early in the transfer window, Arsenal made their 4th sign of the summer transfer window by making what was an initial loan deal for Brentford's David Raya. The deal has been praised by a lot of the fan base, and it appears that Eddie's reputation as a deal maker is taking steps in the right direction. The deal consists of a 3 million loan deal which is a modest outlay by today's standards, and it allows the club to go back into the market should they wish to or need to. And there's more of that in Arteta's press conference. As for David Raya, this is a very interesting addition, and it was interesting to come across the comments of two former Premier League winning goalkeepers when asked about the Raya transfer. So let's see some of the comments made by Ben Foster, for example. Ben Foster's accused Mikel Arteta of rocking the boat at Arsenal after sanctioning the shock move for Brentford goalkeeper David Raya. Ben Foster has questioned whether Arsenal needed Raya given the largely impressive performances of Ramsdale since his 13 million move from Sheffield United in 2021. Foster's quoted to have said on his own YouTube channel, which by the way I think is a great channel, I think David Raya is a problem signing for Arsenal. For me, Aaron Ramsdale is perfect for them. I think he's absolutely perfect. I agree with what you're saying about Raya being great at playing out from the back, but I still think Rambo is incredible at it. He is incredible at it. I know Aaron Ramsdale makes world-class saves that keep Arsenal in games at times. He's a massive personality, and I just think there's no need to rock the boat with this one. Peter Schmeichel's also provided his view. I think he was speaking to BBC Radio 5 Live, and he says, I absolutely do not get it. I cannot understand how a manager can come to the conclusion that it's a great thing to have competition for the number one shirt. A goalkeeper's position is very reactive. You cannot create anything on your own. You have to wait for things to happen. You're now asking your goalkeeper to prove you're better than the other one. That means you now have to go and do stuff, and you don't want that. It's the one position on the pitch where you just want steady. When you have a competition situation, he also plays that game for himself and for that position, and I don't get it. What you do is you put a lot of insecurity into the two of them. At the same time, having two challenging for number one, you also created potentially a bad atmosphere in the dressing room because it's a straight up competition between two guys who will either start or not play. They need to know if it goes wrong, which it does now and again, everyone makes a mistake and everyone costs a goal, that the manager says, that's all right, mate, you're still my number one. You need to have that confidence. If you don't, you cannot perform 100% for the team. So those are views and comments of Ben Foster and Peter Schmeichel, both decorated in their careers. But what I would say from my own perspective is that I think it's far too early to start concluding that adding David Raya to the squad is actually ultimately going to be a negative overall to the whole goalkeeping situation at Arsenal. Arteta will talk about it and does talk about it in his press conference. But why is it the situation that in a goalkeeper's position, there shouldn't really be as much competition as you'd find in any of the outfield positions? That is definitely something to talk about. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't see logically why there should not be the same competition, same level of competition in the goalkeeper position as there are in any other parts of the pitch. So I'll be interested to hear your views on this, as well as other issues that we've covered today. But let's talk about the last thing, and that is Mikel Arteta's press conference, which was ahead of our first away day game at Crystal Palace. So some excerpts from Mikel Arteta's press conference. So when he was questioned on whether Jurrien Timber's injury changes his attitude in the transfer market, Mikel said, I'm more thinking about the resources that we have within the team to keep doing what we want to do. it's true that he was giving us very different things in terms of what we could do on both sides. But again, these things happen and we have to be prepared for that. Much was made about Kieran Tierney's lack of playing time. Didn't come on for the Forest game. And when Mikel was asked whether Kieran Tierney was disappointed not to be involved against Forest, Mikel said, "I hope so, yes." And speaking about David Raya as well, when Mikel was asked whether he has a number one, Mikel responded, "In any position, no. 9, 7, 11, 6, goalkeeper, no, there isn't." And I think that's really telling. This is really the attitude I think that Arteta's trying to bring across the whole of the club. The first team, no position is guaranteed. Everyone has to fight for their place. Once you've got a first team berth, once you're in the starting 11, you cannot rest on your laurels. You will have competition. Arteta will expect the highest standards from you. And in order for us to achieve what the likes of Manchester City have been achieving over the last decade, these are the standards. I'd encourage everyone to listen to or read the full transcript of Arsenal's press conference. And I'd like to hear your views on Arteta's comments, on the game, injury news, transfer window, and pretty much anything Arsenal. And I'd love to hear your views on this first episode of the Arsenal Perspective podcast. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this episode. And I hope you'll be back next time to tap into the Arsenal perspective.